So today we're going to talk. I have a very brief slide, right? Because now we've learned classes, we've learned objects. So I've pretty much given you all of the tools just about. There's, of course, a lot more to this class, but most of the tools in order to actually start programming and building your own programs. Classes and objects are some of the biggest concepts, and we'll just talk about more things relating to those throughout the class. But for the most part, that's going to serve as the foundation for pretty much every program. Right? You know what variables are, you know what variables are used for, you know how to create a class, how to instantiate an object, how to run a program using a main method, how to read from the console. Those are most of the tools that you'll need to build a basic program, which is what we'll do today as part of the class. We're going to build a game, a basketball game. Right? First team to 100 wins. And so a basketball team is composed, you have a team, then you have players on that team. And so we'll talk about how to do all that today. All right, so passing should be objects to methods. Let me fix that real quick, not arrays. Passing objects to methods. So just like when you pass arrays to objects, arrays to methods, you can pass objects to methods. And when you do, it is passed by reference. It passes a reference to that object. It does not create a new copy. All right. And I just wanted to drive home this point. Classes act as templates. Then we can instantiate instances of those classes called objects. Right. We use objects to organize and manipulate data. And we declare objects similar to other types of variables. So let's say, for example, we have an integer. We say int number equals 9. Or let's say, for example, we want to create an array of doubles. We say double weights equals new double, and then we put the size. Same thing with an object. We declare what type it's going to be, automobiles, car, equals new automobile, right? And I know that's a typo right there. Automobile car equals new automobile, right? So we declare objects the same way as any other variable for the most part. We just use the new keyword and then whatever type it is and the constructor we want to call. So right now I'm calling the default constructor. There aren't any parameters, right? But you all created another constructor with parameters. It had the make, model, and number of doors. So that's how you create an object. So when you create that object, you can pass it to a method just like an array. It's passed by reference. It passes a reference to that object. So when you modify the object, you are actually changing that same object. Right? You're not changing a copy of it and returning a copy. When you modify an object in a method, you are modifying that object from wherever it was called from. So let's do an example. Let's say we create an automobile in the main method, and then we have a repair method as well. And so when we repair our automobile, what we're doing for this one, we're just removing a door. All right. So we're going to take the current value of the door, subtract 1, and then set that automobile's door equal to the new number. So for example, let's say we have a Honda Accord. A Honda Accord has 4 doors typically, right? So when we call a repair method, all I want to do is subtract 1 door. So now that new Accord is going to have 3 doors, and then that's it for our repair method right now. Obviously, a real repair would do more than just remove the door, hopefully, or less. But let's say for this example, we're just removing 1 door. So now our Honda Accord is going to have 3 doors. So let's write that example. Where's it at? All right, so the first thing we need to do is create our automobile class. So public class automobile. Automobile. All right. Our automobile has 3 variables like we've been doing. We have string make, string model, and int number of doors. Then we had a constructor, public automobile. I'm going to pass in make, model, and number of doors. And then I'm going to set this dot make equals make, this dot model equals model, and this dot number of doors equals number of doors. Remember, when I use this keyword, I'm referring to the class variables make, model, number of doors. And I'm setting it equal to the parameters, right? Whatever is passed into this constructor. So that is not, this variable is not the same as this one. This variable is not the same as this one, so on and so forth. These are the class variables, make, model, number, and doors, and these are the parameters that are passed in to this constructor. All right, so again, keyword encapsulation. If you remember last class, encapsulation specifies that all of our class variables are made private, and we use getters and setters in order to access and modify them. So a getter obviously returns, it gets whatever variable we want. So public string get make. And all of our getters and setters should be public. Return this dot make, right? So this is a getter for the make of the automobile. And I'm just returning this dot make. That way I can call get make and I get Ford, I get Chevy, I get Honda, whatever it is of this car. Then we have a setter, public void. All setters will have a void set make. And then we want to pass in a string make and set this dot make equal to a new make. And the same thing would apply for model and number of doors. So I'm going to do that real quick. Public string get model. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Public void set model, string model. Our last one would be set number of doors. Right? And so my class is now encapsulated, meaning all of my class variables are private. You cannot access those directly. In order to do so, you must use public getters and setters. That's a key term and a key concept for programming. So this dot number of doors equals number of doors. All right. All right, so we have this automobile class. This is pretty much what you all made last week in lab, correct? So just FYI, in the visualizer, I cannot create another class, so I'm gonna have to put my main method inside this file. But when I do this in NetBeans, I'm gonna put it in a different file. So public static void main string args. I just want you all to see what I'm talking about. So automobile car equals new automobile. I'm creating a object automobile. And I'm going to say the make is Honda, the model is Accord, and the number of doors is 4. all right? And now I'm going to create a repair method, public static void repair, that takes in an automobile as a parameter, car needing repairs. All right, so again, in this method, I want to remove one door from my car. Now, of course, this method doesn't do anything. It's just a dummy method, if you will. But I want to show you what I'm talking about. When you pass a object to a method, it's passed by reference. You'll see a pointer to the same exact object. So what I want to do is int current number of doors equals car needing repairs dot get number of doors. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a new variable and I'm storing the current number of doors that this car has. All right. So when I pass in this object, car needing repairs will equal pretty much the same values that you see here. So int current number of doors will equal 4. All right. And when I show you this, when I visualize this, it'll make a little bit more sense. So int new number of doors equals current minus 1. I'm just subtracting 1 from the number of doors. And then I'm going to say car needing repairs dot set number of doors. Right? I'm setting it to the new number of doors. So I got the current value, I subtracted 1, and now I'm setting it equal to that. All right? And this method has no return, so we're done. Now in my main, all I got to do is call repair the car I created. So I'm creating this object. I'm calling my method repair. I'm passing in the object car. So when I get down to this method, car needing repair is going to equal that same car, all right? Because that's the formal parameter, and this is the actual parameter. All right, so all the values, essentially the object in memory, a reference to it will be passed to this method, and we're calling it car needing repairs. Then down here, I'm getting the current number of doors of that car. I'm getting the new number of doors where I just subtract 1 from it. And then I set that number of doors equal to that new number. And so up here in my main, I'm going to system.out.println. I just want to print out all of the values. Car.getMake. And I'm going to print out the model and the number of doors. Get model and get number of doors. So when I call get number of doors here in my main, I expect it to be 1 less than the number I passed here. So it should be 3. Even though I didn't modify it anywhere in the main, I modified it down here in the method. It's the same object. So let's visualize this. So of course, this first line that's to be executed is the first line in our main. So we're creating this object. Again, what I'm doing here is I'm creating a variable car equals a new automobile, and I'm calling the constructor that I created up here. So you'll see it jump to the constructor. So now we're in the constructor. We're passing Honda, Accord, and Ford. So we're going to set this.make equal to Honda, this.model equal to Accord, this.number of doors equal to 4. And now we have this new object, all right? So we have this car object, and it points to an instance of automobile in memory with make equals Honda, model equals Accord, number of doors equals 4. Are you all with me so far? You just shake your head if you're with me so far. All right, cool. So next, I'm going to call my repair method, all right? And it's going to jump down here. All right, cool. So this is the point I was trying to get across. You see now we're in my method, and car needing repairs points to the same exact object in memory. It does not create a copy of it. Right? And that's passed by reference. It passes a reference to that object in memory. Okay. It's pointing to the same exact object. So any modifications I do down here will affect car in my main. All right. So I'm making these modifications. I'm getting the current number of doors. So it's going to go to a get number of doors method, return that value, which is 4, and current number of doors equals 4. All right. Now, new number of doors is going to equal the current number minus 1, so 3. And then I'm going to set car needing repairs, that set number of doors, to that new number. So I'm going to set it equal to 3. So this dot number of doors equals doors. And you see inside memory, back up 1. Inside memory, when I execute that statement, the same object is modified, right? The same object that car is pointing to, car needing repairs is pointing to, that same object is being modified. All right, and now we're at the end of this repair method. We're back up here. So now look, I didn't change car anywhere inside my main, but the number of doors did change based on this repair method. The reference to that object was modified. All right. So now I'm calling get make, Honda. I'm printing that out down here. Get model should be Accord, printing that out down here. And the number of doors should be 3, printing that out down there. Does that make sense? Somewhat, not really.
It does.
All right. Again, if it doesn't make sense to you, let me know or email me something. All right. So basically, just to recap, what I was doing is, or essentially what I was showing you was, in memory, when you pass an object to a method, it passes the reference to that object. Again, pass by reference. And so any modifications you do in that method will modify the original object. It does not create a copy. All right. When you pass in strings, integers, and doubles, it does pass a copy. Right? So you're not modifying the original variable. However, with objects and arrays, you do modify that original variable. All right. And Java does this for efficiency purposes. It's a lot easier just to pass a reference than to try to copy an entire object, because these objects could consist of a lot of different data, and so trying to pass that and then copy it would require a lot of computational and storage resources. So instead, Java just passes by reference. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is arrays with objects. So if you remember, arrays are lists, or you can have a 2D array, which is a table. And those arrays can consist of any type of data type. So a double, an integer, string. Well, we can also have arrays of objects as well. So let's say I have 10 cars. Instead of creating 10 individual variables, I can create one array, store all 10 of those cars in a list. Right? And I can access it using the indices of that array, 0 through 9. And this is how you would declare it, just like another array of integer. Automobile, double brace, whatever you want to name it, equals new automobile, double brace, and then the size of that array. All right. Just like any other array that we've learned previously in Programming 1, and then the multi-dimensional arrays that we learned at the beginning of the year. You can also do a multi-dimensional array of objects as well. All right. Same thing. So think of objects, when you create them, they're like any other variable. They're just an object. They have other data associated with them. So with the automobile, you have make, model, and number of doors. With athlete, we had name, height, and weight, right? With, I don't know, fruit, you have nutritional facts. You have the calories, sugar, carbs, protein, whatever, right? Those are just objects. But when you create them, you can treat them like any other variable. All right, so this is the main example that I wanted to go through today. All right, the basketball game, because now I've given you most of the tools that you need to create actual programs, right? Actual useful programs that you could potentially use to create, whatever you want. You see a problem, you could potentially create a program to solve that problem. So this example, let's play a basketball game. All right. The basketball game consists of two teams, right? And those teams can be objects, right? You have two teams. So let's create two objects. Team one and team two. Each team has between 12 and 15 players. A player can be an object, right? So a team consists of players, right? 12 to 15 of them. Therefore, inside of our team class, we can create an array of players to hold all of the players on that team. Okay, and so I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's create a new project. Java application, lecture, I think this is lecture 6, I believe. Lecture 6. All right, so let's create our player class first, okay? So right click, new, Java class, a player, all right? Inside of our player class, we have each player, I'm gonna say has a name, private string name, and then each player, private int points. Each player has points, okay? That's it. They have a name and they have points, okay? So let's create a constructor, public player, string name, and int points. And I encourage you all to code this while I'm coding it too, so you can see and put it all together. So this dot name equals name. This dot points equals points. All right. So we have our name and we have our points. A cool tool or a cool feature in NetBeans is that you can create all your getters and setters, or NetBeans will do that for you. So I believe it's under refactor, encapsulate fields. So if you click on that, refactor up here, encapsulate fields, it's going to ask you, all right, for name, I want a getter and I want a setter. For points, I want a getter and a setter as well. Or you can just click select all over here. All the other things you can leave pretty much the same by default, and hit refactor or refactor. And you see it creates all my getters and setters with some comments describing what they do. All right. So NetBeans has a cool feature for you. If you have your class variables, it'll automatically generate your getters and setters for you. All right. So that's what I just did. So one more time. If you click up here, refactor, encapsulate fields, select all, refactor, and it will refactor and encapsulate all of your fields. Right? It provides you all your getters and setters. Cool? Does that make sense to everybody? You can shake your head yes or no if it doesn't.
Right there. Wait, could you do that again?
Yeah, no problem. All right. So what you do is you click up here, refactor, over the top, and go down to encapsulate fields. Select all, because I want to do name and points. Then hit refactor. And it inserts all of those getters and setters for you. All right. And by default, again, we want all of our class variables to be private. And then we want getters and setters, public getters and setters, to access those variables. Okay. Eclipse is another IDE similar to NetBeans. It has a similar feature as well. All right. Okay, cool. So now we have our player class. Okay. Player. So we're assuming we're going to create objects because each team has 12 to 15 players. So let's create a team class. Java class, team. All right. So inside our team class, we really only have one variable, which is our players. All right. All we have is our players. So again, we can have an array of objects. So players, player, I'm going to name it players. All right, that's a class variable. I'm going to make it private. That's a class variable. Private player, and then brace players. So basically, I create an array of players. So now in my constructor, public team, I'm not going to pass anything into the constructor, okay? That's the point of the constructor. It should construct your class. So instead, inside my constructor, I'm going to actually create my players and add them to the array. Okay. So the constructor, what we're going to do is create players, add to players array. 2 steps. One, we want to create the players. The next, we want to add them to the players array. However, the first thing we need to do is instantiate our players array. Right now, we've declared it, but we haven't actually created it in memory. All right, so now we have to first create that array so that we can use it. So let's randomly generate a number of players. Import java.util.random. What's the error? Okay. So int, actually random, rand equals new random. Int number of players equals rand.next int 15. But if you remember, this will give me a number between 0 and 15. I want that number to be between 12 and 15. Okay. So what we need to do, int range equals 15 minus 12. All right. So this is our range, which is 3. We put that in here, range, then plus our minimum. So this is going to give me a number between 0 and 3. And then, so that's going to be 0, 1, 2. Actually, I think I need to add 1 here. So 0 and 3. And then I'm going to add 12 to that. So for example, let's say I get a random number 2. 2 plus 12 would give me a 4. A 14, I'm sorry. So 14 players. Let's say this randomly generates a number 0. 0 plus 12, I would get 12 players, right? So this ensures I'll always get a number between 12 and 15, which is the number of players that we want. So now let's create our array. This dot players equals new player array of size number of players. So what I just did is I actually created or instantiated my array with that size number of players. So whatever this value is, it could be 12, it could be 15. I'm going to create an array of that size. Okay. Next, so what I just did here, this step right here, randomly set the number of players between 12 and 15. Right here, instantiated my players array with a random number of players. Next, iterate through the players array and create a player object. So what I want to do now is for each one of these indices in this array, I want to create a player object and add it to the array. Okay. Again, the array can hold those objects. So what I'm going to do is iterate through the array for an I equals 0. I is less than players, this dot players dot length, I plus plus. So now let's create a player. So player P equals new player. All right. I think has a name. I'm just going to do away with this right here and just do an empty constructor. Right now, I don't have any names, but we could read the names from a file or something like that. And I'm going to set points equal to 0. So here we go. I created my player. Now all I have to do is this dot players, which is my array, at index I equals P. I set it equal to the player I created. Okay. I know this is a pretty advanced, if you will, example, but it takes everything that we've learned so far and puts it into one program. I'm trying to show you how you can use these objects, how you can use these classes to recreate anything essentially that we have in our physical environments, right? And each one of those we can, if you can break it down like this, you can represent it in code, all right? So if I look at football, football also has teams and players, right? So the teams are composed of players. There's also coaches. There's also training staff. There's also management. So in our classes, we could create a class for each one of those types of personnel and then add them all to the team so that when we get to our team, we can just say get management and it will return all of our managers. We can say get players. It will return all of our players, right? So you can represent anything for the most part in our physical environments in code using objects and classes, all right? And that's what I'm doing right here. I randomly create a number of players, or I got a random number between 12 and 15. Then I set my array to that random number, and then I iterate through that array, setting each one of those players equal to a new player object, right? A player object. All right, so that's my team, my constructor. I created the players. That's it. Now inside this team method, I do want a couple additional methods. So public, of course, we can do our getters and setters, refactor, encapsulate fields, select all, refactor, get players, set players, okay? Another method I want, public int get team points. I want to get the total amount of points that this team has. So when I call this method, return the total number of points. So how would we do that? How would we get the points for each player? Well, int total points equals 0 right now. Next, what we can do is iterate through all of our players and get each player's points, add that to total points, right? So basically, one by one, go through each player, get their points, and add it to our total. So let's do that. For int I equals 0, I is less than this dot players dot length, I plus plus, total points plus equal players at index I dot get points. Remember, each one of the indices inside this player array is a player object. So I can call the get points method from our player object, and that will return the points that he or she has. And then lastly, return total points. Right? So I just iterated through all of my players, collected their points, added to total points, and return that. That way, when I call this method, I can get all of the points for this team. All right. Cool so far? Yes or no?
Yeah, can you go back up a little bit? I'm trying to get the players array.
This is the top.
Or my fault, the for loop for it.
Oh, down here. Again, classes and objects establish the foundation for most programming languages. So if you can understand this concept, you can apply this to pretty much any programming language. I use Python as my main programming language. Python has classes and objects. I've used C++. I was doing some game development, classes and objects. I've used JavaScript, classes and objects. So most programming languages that you'll come across use the same format. iOS development uses classes and objects. And it's saying I have an error somewhere. I believe the import, let's see, what's the error? Oh, no error. All right, cool. Like I say, I believe the import goes before the package, but the package goes first. All right, so no error. We're good. So in our player object, I'm going to create another method just to simplify what I'm going to do next. Public void add points and points to add. Basically, what I want to do is pass in some points to add to our current points. So I'm going to say this dot points plus equal points to add. Otherwise, I'd have to get the points, then add the points to this, then call set points. Instead, I'm just going to create this method, add points, and it's going to pass in some type of integer, add points to this player. So when they score, I'm going to call the add points method. And we know they scored 2 points, they scored 3 points, they scored 1 point. All right. So inside our main, okay. First thing I want to do is randomly decide which team scores. So I'm going to basically flip a coin. I'm going to flip a coin. So let's create a random object, import java.util.random. I believe we might run out of time, but I'm going to try to get this done. Random rand equals new random. And then while true. So this while loop is just going to keep going. All right, keep going, keep going. Team to score. Create a Boolean, team to score equals rand.next Boolean. I'm just going to flip a coin, true or false. All right. The first thing I need to do, which I failed to do, is create my teams, obviously. So team1 equals new team, and team2 equals new team as well. And those are going to go to the constructor, create our player objects, add them to our players array for each team. So if team to score is true, we're going to say team1 scores. All right. Else, if team to score is false, team2 scores. All right. All right, cool. So flip a coin, see which team scores. Next, I want to randomly decide which player from the team scores. So which player do I want to score? Just random number. So int player to score equals rand.nextInt. I'm going to pass in team1 .get players.length. The maximum number will be between 0 and the length of the players array. Right? Because the players array is variable, it varies in length. I don't want to just say 0 to 15. I want to get the actual length of that team's player array. All right, now next, int points scored equals rand.nextInt between 1 and 3. Next int 4 plus 1. All right. So basically, this gets a random number between, actually, 3. This gets a random number between 0 and 3. Then I want to add 1 to that. So basically, they can score either 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points. If you're with me so far. All right. Next, I want to get the team1 .get players. That returns the array of players. At index player to score. So let's say this player to score is index 7. So we're going to get the 7th player. Remember, that's an object. Dot add points. Points to score. So now we're going to add points to that player. Boom. Cool. Our last thing to do is check to see if this team has over 100 points. So if team 1 dot get total points is greater than or equal to 100, system dot out dot println team 1 wins, and then break. We're going to break the while loop. All right. So again, let's go back through this. The first thing I'm doing right here is I'm flipping a coin, either true or false, to determine which team scores. All right. Next, right here, I'm randomly figuring out which player on that team scores. So it might be player 2, it might be player 3, it might be player 4. It doesn't matter. One of them will score. Then next, I'm figuring out how much they scored. So either 1 point, 2 point, or 3 points. Then I'm getting that player and I'm adding those points to that player object. Lastly, I'm checking to see if that team overall has over either equal to or more than 100 points. If they do, they win and we break our while loop. Okay. Same thing goes for team 2. So I just copied and pasted. Instead of team 1, I'm going to say team 2. Points scored. And then again, instead of team 1, I'm going to say team 2 again. And then team 2. Team 2 wins. And then outside the while loop, I just want to print out system.out.println team 1 points. I realize it's the end of class, but real quick, I just want to print out the points for team 1. Team 1 dot get total points, then system dot out dot println team 2 points, and then just call that method team 2 dot get team points. All right, so it should print out what each team had when I run this. Hopefully, I'm fingers crossed. Yep. So team 1 had 101 points. Team 2 had 68.
Are you gonna put this lecture on the website?
I certainly am.
I was just about to ask that.
I run this again, I imagine the outcome will be slightly different because all of this is random. Yep, team 2 wins now. Team 2 wins again. And you could, if you really wanted to get more granular, you could go through and print out the box score for each player on every team, if you wanted to. Right? I could go through team 1 and see how much did player 0 have, how much did player 1 have, who's actually contributing to our win or our losses. When I keep running this, I should keep getting different outcomes. Right? It's pretty interesting.
Is the max score like 100 or something? Pretty much.
Yeah, every time right here, I'm checking right here.
Okay.
If it's greater than or equal to 100, that team wins. Although if this was the Brooklyn Nets, it looks like the first team to 150 wins. So 100, 100 again, 101. Yep. And yeah, this will be put on the website. I'm going to try to put it up there either later today or tomorrow. But I do have all previous lectures up there. Cool.